I read a book recently by Ray Kurzweil called The Singularity is Near. Interesting book, and when Ray talks about his book, he uses a graph very similar to this one, which illustrates the evolution of technology as an exponential advance. So these data points represent millions of instructions per second per $1,000, which is a commonly used measure of computer processing power. And the data doesn't look a lot like what we just saw in the penny graph, but that's because it's plotted on a logarithmic scale. So a logarithmic scale, also known as an exponential scale, is used when you're looking at data that crosses many orders of magnitude. If you didn't, for instance, if we plotted it the way we had done the pennies a few moments ago, you'd end up with a long straight line on the bottom and then one vertical line on the right, and it would look something like this. I tried it. So what we're looking at is an interesting set of data that actually accurately represents exponential growth. But if you'll notice, even though it's plotted on a logarithmic scale, there's still an actual trend upwards. The trend line curves upwards. If we went back and plotted the penny data on the same scale that this data is plotted on, you would see an angled line, but it would be straight. What this line represents is this curving upwards represents an advance of technological computing processing power that is beyond exponential. So when I thought about this, I started to think about the link between technology and marketing. So marketing is communication. You have copy and you have creative. Sometimes they're combined, but they form a message. That message needs to be rendered or written, somehow made into a form that's consumable by its audience. Technology is that medium. So whether it's the printing press, the TV, the internet, they all represent both the potential and the limitations of marketing and communication. So there's no link between the two. The evolution of technology is the evolution of marketing. Okay, so are we an industry at a point of explosive change? I asked myself this: how many screens did I consume media on just 5 years ago? And if I'm really honest, the answer is 3. Because I did play some video games back then as well as now. And so there's television, the World Wide Web, video games. Today, the answer is at least 10, with the likes of Hulu, Amazon Unbox, my iPad, my iPhone. I mean, there's an enormous list. But to really illustrate this point, I want to ask this question. How many of you own an iPad? That's pretty good. Not quite half, but I'd say close. Keep your hands up, though. And now, everyone who owned an iPad 6 months ago, keep your hands up, and everyone else put them down. So, 4 or 5, 6, that's a pretty remarkable increase in adoption. You guys can put your hands down now. In adoption of a new technology. So I want to take another look at that data. So it's the same data that we saw before, but this time I've added a few data points that represent events in our history that have had a specific effect on advertising. Obviously, television. I had to throw Mad Men in there. As you can see, as we get closer to 2010, I've run out of room to list all of the things that I had decided to put up there. But it's important to note that these are all customer or client-facing services or products. This says nothing of our ability to, say, serve 15 billion ads a day or 300,000 ads per second, or to process a request in real time for the purpose of doing behavioral targeting or real-time bidding within milliseconds. So I think the answer is yes. We're an industry in a period of explosive exponential growth. So I've used the imagery of an explosion several times now to describe where we are as an industry. But it's not actually accurate. Because if you think about an explosion, imagine being at a circus and a performer is shot out of a cannon. That begins with an explosion and a very rapid burst of speed, but it's immediately followed by a slowing, an abatement. And what we're experiencing is not that. What we're experiencing is an increase in speed, an increase in complexity. And things are going faster and faster and faster, always faster. And there is something in the universe that can accurately be used to characterize that situation. It's a point in space-time where matter has become infinitely dense. And the result is a gravitational pull that's so strong that it becomes the source of a black hole. It's called a singularity. When you approach a singularity, your speed increases, not constantly, but exponentially. So I wonder, is all the turmoil and the chaos and the difficulty that we experience in our industry today, is it possibly caused or possibly the symptoms of our own approach to a singularity, the marketing singularity? So when you think about that, when you think about what's happening to us, the rate at which we're advancing, the rate at which things are changing, you have to think about the metaphors that we use and that we've always used to describe our industry. For instance, we call it the Wild West, something that can be tamed. We refer to it as nascent, something that needs to mature. But these don't accurately describe, or these rather imply, a level of control that we don't have anymore. It's as though we've accelerated well beyond the stages of crawling and walking and running, and we're now in free fall. So if you think for a minute about free fall, there are ways that you can interact with your environment to affect your progression. One is you can use your hands, like the control surfaces of an airplane. You can introduce tools, such as an airboard or a wingsuit. And these things give you a measure of control over your descent, but they don't change the fact that you're still falling. I believe that we need to think differently about our solutions. We need to think of us as being in a state of free fall. And the way that we interact with our environment, with our industry, and the way we provide or create solutions this has to be taken into account. For instance, when we create guidelines, they need to be able to bend and flex in the areas that are important, that will allow them to last longer, because things are changing so fast that if we create a standard or a guideline and it isn't able to change with the times, then it won't last very long. It won't be useful. Those are the kinds of things that we need to keep in mind as we move forward and work on these kinds of problems. So now that we've swapped our running shoes for a wingsuit, we should get back to the business of bringing more brand dollars online. And that's exactly how we think about the industry. We think about television, print, radio as traditional, and we think of internet, mobile, et cetera, as online or digital. But the advertising industry is not two things. It's one thing. It's an industry that's in the throes of a transformation. And we have to think about it as such if we're going to do our jobs and facilitate that evolution. And so here we are today, at the start of the 2010 AdOps Summit and another decade of exponential change. I'm excited to say that all of these topics that we're going to be discussing today represent strategic building blocks towards that goal of bringing more brand dollars online. And all of the people that we have here as speakers, or as panelists, or as leads of panels, represent the experts that will help get us there. So to them, and all of you, I want to say, enjoy the conference, and thank you.